Kurtis, the Burkes of Castlebar, evangelical Christians, are perhaps Ireland's best known family and certainly the most notorious. They are now campaigning in the north and against the DUP. What's the latest twist in this story?
Yeah, so like you mentioned in the intro there, some of the Burkes turned up at the DUP conference. It was held last week at the Le Mans Hotel in County Down. And they actually turned up it was on the Friday and the Saturday, and they turned up for both days. And the police had to be called on the second day. This all relates to basically their gripe with the Education Minister, Paul Givan. They were actually filmed confronting him outside the venue, including by people such as, Burke's mother, Martina, and his brother, Josiah. And Paul Givan actually filmed the exchange, and he invited the Burkes in for a private chat. And basically, they were just doing what they usually do, rocking up to places with their placards and just really shouting at figures and hoping to get their message across.
Paul Givan, he seemed to me, this is my view of watching the footage, he seemed to be annoyed, but he did seem restrained. He invited them in. He tried to engage them in conversation. He did it. I think he did his best. He tried to get them to sit down and speak to him. They were not engaging with that narrative in any way, shape or form. And eventually security of some form intervenes. Yeah,
so the video appears to show a plainclothes police officer, sort of instructing them or telling them to leave. Yeah, I think this is just a really interesting one. The Burkes are confronting the Education Minister, Paul Givan. Paul Givan is a DUP minister, and they are accusing him of promoting an LGBT agenda in schools. That's not, just to make that clear, they're accusing him of promoting LGBT.
How would you explain why your incredulity to an international audience?
In terms of the Burkes, it's incredibly difficult. This, the DUP are, they're not a liberal party. They're not pro-LGBT rights in school. We'll get on to this, I'm sure, but Paul Givan recently withdrew support and guidance for transgender pupils in schools in his role as Education Minister. But the Burkes still decided to turn up and accuse him of, like you said, promoting sodomy and promoting the LGBT agenda in schools.
They came back the next day. They held placards claiming children had been sacrificed to the LGBT agenda and accusing the DUP of denying Christian beliefs. Now, the DUP were set up by the Reverend Ian Paisley. They've always been very openly and strongly evangelical and Christian in their outlook. This is why I suppose this is so strange. Eyewitness said the Burkes, which is Martina Burke and Josiah Burke, at this occasion said they'd been asked to leave the scene after the PSNI were called. But this is a pattern now. Mm-hmm. They seem to be not only going after certain members of the DUP, but religious members of the DUP, which will make this even more strange.
Yeah, for example, another incident included, the Burkes confronting Mervyn Storey, who was literally in the car park of a Free Presbyterian church in Ballymoney. Mervyn Storey is a former DUP MLA, and he's actually a former Education Minister as well. And he's now the chair of the Education Authority, who Paul Givan wrote to withdraw that previous guidance that I mentioned. The Burkes accused Mervyn Storey of enforcing transgender ideology through his role in the EA. He was appointed to this role by Paul Givan, which explains probably why they're going after him. I just don't think, the optics of accusing someone of promoting a transgender ideology, not only is this person a DUP minister, but they're also standing in the grounds of a Free Presbyterian church.
And they've also confronted a Presbyterian minister, Roger Higginson. Again, this was all filmed both by the Burke family and by supporters of Roger Higginson. I think that was in East Belfast. Yeah. And again, and you mentioned as well,
that both Paul Givan and Mervyn Storey tried to reason. There's talks. They wanted, like Paul Givan invited the Burkes in. He wanted to talk to them. He wanted to sit down and he wanted to hear their concerns, because it is worth pointing out that although the Burkes are seen as extreme and they're obviously evangelical Christians, Paul Givan is in a party that is known for their Christian ethos. They're known for their strong Christian beliefs. So this isn't exactly something that they're going to sit down with and disagree on.
And he invited them to sit down. Yeah. And they also attempted to confront Edwin Poots in recent weeks. Again, someone who's strong Christian beliefs.
And again, they turned up at his church.
He invited them to speak. Mm-hmm. Come to my office. Let's speak in private. But this might seem a ridiculous question, Kurtis. But sorry, what is this about?
It primarily relates to the guidance in schools on supporting transgender young people. So that's a non-statutory piece of guidance that's provided to schools in order for them to deal with pupils who may identify as transgender. It's published by the Education Authority, but I'd like to make it very clear, it's not the law. It's not a legal binding document which instructs schools that you must do this. It's simply guidance for if schools come across a pupil who may identify as transgender or who may feel like they are transgender, and therefore it's a guide for teachers on how to support that pupil.
But hold on a second now, because we and it is sometimes very difficult to understand exactly what point the Burkes are trying to make. They make it in a certain style. It's very personalised. It's very condemning. It's very loud. It's very relentless. And they certainly don't want to, there's no conversation involved. They want to talk and the other person must listen. There's no listening involved. But, I mean, we understand that some of their claims at least relate to an Education Authority document entitled Guidance for Schools on Supporting Transgender Young People, which was published in 2019. But that guidance was withdrawn at the start of September by none other
than Paul Givan. Yeah, exactly. He wrote to the Education Authority, of which Mervyn Storey is the chair, and asked for the guidance to be withdrawn.
Now, what's the reaction to this been? Because, turning up at Hebron Free Presbyterian Church, confronting Mervyn Storey and other people, I would suspect that local people would be wild thrown over that.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen some of the video footage, people are not exactly thrilled. The Burkes are known for their hyperbolic, form of protests. They don't simply turn up places and want conversations, as we've talked about. They turn up, they shout, they have placards. They try and get their point across in the most hyperbolic way possible.